The value is not something you beg for, it is something you embody. In relationships, many try to gain respect by force, attention by demand, or love by performance. But the truth is, when your value must be proven, it is already lost. A woman's true power is not in how loud she speaks, but in how deeply she knows herself. It is not found in seeking validation, but in radiating self-respect. What destroys this inner value is not rejection or failure, it is the subtle habits that leak self-worth over time. Today, we will speak of 4 silent destroyers, 4 mindsets, behaviors, and energies that diminish your presence before a man, not because he says so, but because you forget who you are. If you are willing to return to inner discipline, clarity, and quiet strength, your value won't need to be chased. It will speak for itself. Over-explaining your worth reveals an inner doubt that cannot be hidden by words. In the pursuit of love, validation, and emotional connection, many forget that value is not something that must be constantly spoken about. It is something that is felt in silence. A truly grounded presence requires no justification. It does not rush to explain itself. It does not plead to be understood. It allows the energy to speak louder than the words. When a woman begins to over-explain who she is, what she deserves, and why she should be treated a certain way, it often comes from a subtle but deep fear that perhaps she is not being seen, not being valued, or worse, not being enough. And instead of correcting that belief internally, she attempts to repair it externally through explanation, through convincing, through emotional effort. But the more effort is made to prove value, the more that value begins to appear uncertain. Not just to the man in front of her, but to herself. This over-explaining can take many forms. It can be long messages filled with justifications. It can be conversations where silence is uncomfortable, so it is filled with words to maintain closeness. It can be repeating boundaries that were already set because they were not honored the first time. It can be the subtle attempt to remind someone how good, how loyal, how loving, how worthy you are, hoping that if you say it enough, they will finally believe it and act accordingly. But in doing so, you unknowingly give your power away. You teach the other person that you are unsure of yourself, that your worth is negotiable, and that you need their approval to feel whole. This energy is not magnetic, it is heavy. It does not invite connection. It repels respect. Stillness and clarity are far more powerful than explanation. When you know who you are, you do not need to say it over and over again. Your tone, your posture, your silence, your boundaries all communicated without force. There is a natural authority in a woman who is rooted in herself. She does not chase understanding. She does not demand acknowledgement. She allows people to see her clearly, and if they don't, she does not panic, she simply observes, because she knows that her value is not reduced by someone's inability to recognize it. She understands that people see others not as they are, but as they are ready to see them. And if someone cannot see clearly, it is not her job to open their eyes. It is her duty to keep hers open. Over-explaining often comes from a place of emotional anxiety. It is the discomfort of not being met, not being heard, or not being received, and the fear that silence means disconnection. But silence is not always absence, it can be strength. It can be the space where a man has to confront himself, his behavior, and how he is showing up. When you always fill the silence with explanation, you rob him of the opportunity to feel your distance, to recognize your energy shifting, to reflect on his own behavior. You take on the emotional labor of both people, hoping it will create closeness, but it only leads to imbalance. True connection cannot be forced, it must be inspired. The woman who is always explaining is often the one who has forgotten how to listen to her own intuition. Instead of trusting what she feels, she seeks to make others understand her feelings. Instead of honoring the moment when her peace is disturbed, she tries to correct the disturbance through words. But no amount of explaining will restore what was broken by energetic misalignment. It must be addressed at the level of behavior and self-respect. When something feels off, when respect is withheld, when energy shifts, it is not always a cue to speak louder. Sometimes it is a cue to become still, to observe, to remember who you are before you ask anyone else to. There is dignity in restraint, not because you are hiding, but because you are grounded. Not every reaction deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding requires a speech. When your self-worth is intact, you learn to let silence carry what words cannot. You learn to step back without announcing it. You learn to hold your center without needing to prove a point. And this type of energy is unmistakable. A man who feels this presence will either rise to meet it or fall away from it. Not because you pushed him, but because your energy speaks a truth that no words can dilute. This is not about being cold or distant. It is about being clear. Clarity is one of the highest forms of love toward yourself and others. And clarity often does not come from more explaining. It comes from honesty. It comes from knowing what you value, what you are available for, and what you are no longer willing to entertain. This inner clarity leads to outer alignment. It teaches others how to treat you without needing to repeat yourself endlessly. It makes you a mirror, reflecting the energy you receive, not exaggerating, not diminishing, just reflecting. And in that reflection, others have the choice to adjust or to exit. Relationships are not maintained through performance. They are sustained through presence, through mutual respect, mutual effort, and mutual recognition. If you find yourself constantly explaining, defending, or justifying your worth, it may be time to pause and return to yourself. Ask yourself why you feel the need to be heard so loudly. What part of you still doubts her own value unless it is confirmed by another? What part of you still believes that silence is rejection rather than power? The answers are not meant to shame, they are meant to guide. To bring you back to the version of you who knows that her energy speaks louder when she is grounded, not when she is trying. Ultimately, the woman who holds her value quietly becomes undeniable, not because she makes herself louder, but because she makes herself clearer. She no longer debates her worth. She no longer negotiates her standards. She no longer over-explains her heart. She knows that those who are meant to walk with her will meet her in presence, not persuasion. They will feel the weight of her silence, not as absence, but as strength. And they will understand that her value is not something to be convinced of. It is something to be honored. Seeking constant validation weakens your presence and shifts your energy from grounded to needy. A woman who understands her worth does not require constant reassurance to feel secure. She lives from a place of knowing rather than needing. When validation becomes a pattern, it reveals a disconnection from the self, a loss of inner certainty, and a reliance on the opinions and reactions of others to determine one's emotional stability. This creates a dynamic that not only drains your own energy, but also shifts the power in any relationship, especially with a man. It communicates that your self-worth is conditional, that it must be externally confirmed in order to be real. And this neediness over time begins to erode the magnetic presence you once carried. Validation in its healthy form is natural. We all want to be seen, acknowledged, and appreciated. But when this desire becomes constant, when you find yourself repeatedly checking if he's still interested, still approving, still attracted, still listening, it reveals something deeper, an inner voice that doubts itself, and a fear that without external affirmation, you will lose your sense of importance. In that space, your energy begins to chase instead of attract. You begin to ask instead of own. You begin to perform instead of simply be. And The more you rely on another person's validation to feel whole, the more that wholeness slips away from you. A grounded presence is built on self-trust. It is the unshakable belief that even in silence, even in distance, even in challenge, your value remains. When you seek constant validation, you teach a man to lead your emotional state. You hand him the keys to your peace. Every text you wait for, every compliment you fish for, every question you ask, not from curiosity, but from insecurity, it all sends a signal. I am not sure of myself and I need you to confirm me. This dynamic slowly dissolves respect. It does not create intimacy. It creates pressure. It burdens the relationship with the task of keeping you emotionally regulated, which is a responsibility that belongs to you. The need for validation often comes from early patterns, perhaps being emotionally neglected, overlooked, or misunderstood in childhood. The nervous system learned to stay alert, to seek signs of approval in order to feel safe. But while this pattern may have been necessary then, it becomes harmful now. When you continue seeking validation in every interaction, you never allow the adult version of yourself to lead. You allow the younger, fearful part of you to take control of how you show up, and in doing so, you dim your natural strength. Healing begins when you notice the urge to be validated, and instead of acting from it, you breathe through it. You reassure yourself. You reconnect inward. You remember that your value did not decrease just because someone didn't reflect it back to you in the moment. Relationships thrive on authenticity. Constant validation seeking creates a mask. You say what you think he wants to hear. You show up in a way that secures approval rather than expresses your truth. You shrink when you should stand tall. You overextend when you should hold back. This distortion of self slowly causes disconnection both from your partner and from yourself. He begins to interact not with your essence, but with your performance. And you begin to lose touch with the part of you that is bold, soft, powerful, grounded. Not because she disappeared, but because you buried her under the need to be accepted. Presence cannot be faked. Energy does not lie. A woman who is secure in herself doesn't need to prove anything. She walks into a room and is felt before she is heard. She doesn't compete for attention because she knows her energy speaks for itself. She is kind, but not performative. She is open, but not desperate. She gives, but not at the cost of herself. This kind of presence is what draws in healthy connection, not because she is flawless, but because she is full of herself. In the highest sense, she is full of her own essence, not looking to someone else to fill her up. Validation that is earned organically through presence, through consistency, through shared respect is powerful, but it must never be the goal. When a man affirms you, it should feel like a mirror, not a lifeline. It should reflect what you already know about yourself, not rescue you from your doubt. This is the shift from need to wholeness. When you no longer need him to say something to feel good about yourself, his words become a gift, not a requirement. You receive love instead of chase it. You attract admiration instead of demand it. This inner work asks for radical honesty. You must be willing to ask yourself, why do I need him to validate me right now? What am I afraid will happen if he doesn't? What part of me still doesn't feel worthy unless it is praised? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to free you. The moment you become aware of these patterns, you reclaim the power to change them. You stop waiting for love to arrive in a certain way, and you stop becoming the source of the love you seek. Self-gratification is a practice. It is not about arrogance or pretending to be invulnerable. It is about speaking to yourself with respect before you expect others to. It is about honoring your efforts, your beauty, your growth, without needing someone else to point it out first. When you begin to fill your own cup, Every compliment becomes extra, not essential. Every kind gesture becomes appreciated, not required. And your energy shifts from grasping to giving. You no longer approach a man as someone who can complete you, but as someone who can complement you. Over time, this shift transforms your relationships. Men respond differently to a woman who is not constantly asking, "Do you still want me?" but instead radiates the quiet confidence of, "I know who I am, I know what I bring, and I am not afraid to be alone with it." This energy commands respect. It invites depth. It challenges immaturity and calls forward presence. You no longer have to ask for reassurance because your very being becomes reassuring. Not through perfection, but through consistency. Not through volume, but through vibrational clarity. Your value does not increase because he sees it. It increases the moment you decide to stop questioning it. The moment you sit with yourself and choose not to chase another voice, to confirm what your own voice already knows, that you are enough, that you are whole, that your energy speaks for itself when you stop trying to convince. And in that quiet knowing, you become undeniable. Not because you were validated, but because you finally remembered who you are. Tolerating disrespect silently teaches him how to treat you without consequence. What you allow, you affirm. In the subtle and often unspoken moments of relationship, boundaries are being established not by the words you speak, but by the behavior you accept without correction. When a man crosses a line, ignores your needs, speaks to you in a tone that wounds rather than builds, and you say nothing, not out of peace, but out of fear, you send a message. And the message is this: I will absorb the discomfort. I will carry the weight of this moment. I will remain even when I feel dishonored. Over time, this becomes the blueprint by which he interacts with you. Not necessarily out of malice, but out of habit. Because human behavior adjusts to what is tolerated. Disrespect often begins quietly. A comment that feels off, but you brush it aside. A plan that was cancelled last minute with no real regard for your time, and you say it's okay when inside it wasn't. A moment when your opinion was dismissed and you let it slide to keep the peace. These moments seem small, but they create a pattern where your silence becomes the permission slip for further disregard, and what starts as tolerance soon morphs into resentment. Not only toward the man, but toward yourself for abandoning your voice in exchange for temporary harmony. Many women remain silent because they fear that speaking up will drive him away, create conflict, or make them appear difficult. But it is this very silence that chips away at their self-respect. You were not created to beg for honor. You were designed to walk in it. And when you diminish your own discomfort to maintain connection, you teach him that his convenience is more important than your dignity. True connection cannot exist where there is silent suffering. It thrives only where truth is spoken and respected. Speaking up does not mean attacking. It does not mean confronting every moment with force. It means expressing your reality calmly, clearly, and without apology. It means saying, "That didn't feel right," or "When that happened, I felt disrespected," or "I'm not comfortable with that." These are not signs of weakness or insecurity. They are signs of emotional maturity. A woman who honors herself enough to address what hurts is a woman who will not allow her light to be dimmed for the sake of someone else's comfort. There is strength in quiet confidence, in the ability to walk away from what does not align with your values. Not as a punishment, but as a reflection of your standards. The moment you choose to stay silent, when you know you should speak, you begin to trade your authenticity for acceptance. And what you trade your authenticity for, you will eventually resent. This is why many women feel emotionally depleted in relationships. They are carrying not only their own feelings, but also the emotional weight of what they never said. And that silence becomes a heavy burden. A man who respects you will not leave because you express a boundary. In fact, your willingness to be honest becomes the filter that reveals whether he is truly capable of meeting you at the level of emotional integrity. If your honesty causes him to distance himself, criticize you, or shut down, then he has shown you that your voice is incompatible with his comfort. And this is valuable information, not to make you feel rejected, but to make you feel clear about what energy you will allow into your space and what you will no longer entertain. Your silence should never be the reason someone feels they can mistreat you. Silence, when rooted in strength, is powerful. It creates mystery, it holds boundaries, it commands respect. But silence rooted in fear only creates imbalance. The key is not to speak to be heard, but to speak to be true. You do not need to over-explain, to justify, or to convince. You simply need to stand in your reality with grace. Your truth does not need embellishment. It only needs your willingness to honor it. When you begin to speak up, something else happens. You start to rebuild trust with yourself. Every time you name what doesn't feel good, every time you say no when it's easier to say yes, every time you walk away from a conversation that lacks respect, you affirm your own value. You become your own protector. And this changes everything, because the more you respect yourself, the less space you make for disrespect, not out of anger, but out of alignment. This practice of honoring your voice will often feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been conditioned to keep peace at all costs. You may shake, you may doubt, you may feel guilt rising, but discomfort is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It is often the sign that you're doing something new, something healing, something necessary. Each time you choose truth over silence, you reclaim a part of yourself that was once silenced for the sake of being liked, being kept, or being accepted. And as you grow in this strength, your energy begins to shift. You stop attracting connections that thrive on your silence. You stop being drawn to men who only value you when you're quiet, agreeable, and accommodating. You start to see that love built on your silence is not love. It is control disguised as care. And you rise above it. You rise into relationships that honor dialogue, that respect emotion, that see truth as a bridge, not a battle. When a man sees that you will speak with clarity when something is misaligned, he will either rise to match your respect or fall away, because he cannot. Either way, you win, because your goal is not to hold on to everyone. It is to honor yourself so deeply that only those aligned with that honor remain. This is how value is sustained, not by demanding it from others, but by refusing to betray yourself to receive it. The more consistently you live from this space, the less effort is needed. You no longer have to teach anyone how to treat you. Your presence does the teaching for you. You are not here to carry the weight of another's comfort while yours is ignored. You are not here to be agreeable at the cost of your truth. You are not here to remain silent so others don't feel confronted. You are here to live, speak, and walk in alignment with your worth. And when you do, you will find that the right man does not fear your voice. He respects it, he welcomes it, and he is made better by it. Abandoning your personal discipline for the sake of attachment dissolves your inner strength. Discipline is not just about routine, it is a sacred structure that holds the essence of your identity. It is what protects your peace, shapes your energy, and reminds you of your values when emotions begin to blur your clarity. A woman who lives with discipline has a quiet power. Her day is guided by intention, not impulse. Her words are measured, not reactive. Her choices reflect long-term wisdom, not short-term emotion. But when attachment to a man causes her to start bending the very structure that once kept her grounded, something inside begins to erode. not because of him, but because of the choice to shift her life to orbit his. It begins innocently. You cancel a morning routine to answer his call late at night. You skip the gym or meditation to spend more time with him, even though your body and mind were calling for solitude. You delay your projects, rearrange your calendar, or ignore your intuition. All because his presence feels urgent, or because you fear that saying no will create distance. In these moments, the priority slowly changes from internal alignment to emotional closeness. You trade your discipline for his attention. You begin to think less about who you're becoming and more about how to keep the connection alive. And while this may feel romantic on the surface, underneath it is a quiet abandonment of self. Discipline is not a rigid system, it is a form of self-respect. It is the way you keep your promises to yourself. When you break those promises consistently, you lose more than just time or productivity. You lose trust in yourself. And when that trust fades, insecurity grows. You start to seek from the relationship what you once gave yourself: structure, stability, purpose. But no man, no matter how grounded, can become the foundation you abandon. He might admire your strength in the beginning, but if you begin to dissolve it to accommodate the relationship, that admiration fades. Not necessarily because he loves you less, but because you've disconnected from the very energy that made you magnetic. A disciplined woman does not live in extremes. She does not need to choose between love and self-respect. She knows how to create space for both. She makes time for connection without sacrificing her core. She can be deeply nurturing without becoming emotionally dependent. Her ability to be present with another is rooted in her ability to be present with herself first. This kind of woman does not need to control the relationship because she has mastered the art of controlling her focus, her habits, and her emotional reactions. She does not seek to be saved because she has built a life she does not need saving from. The attachment becomes dangerous when it overrides alignment, when you begin to act from fear. Fear of losing him, fear of being alone, fear of disappointing someone. You shift from creation to reaction. Your energy becomes unstable. You stop making decisions based on what's true for you and start making decisions based on what will keep him happy. This often leads to self-sabotage, not in dramatic ways, but in the slow fading of your voice, your presence, your discipline. You become so consumed with being chosen that you forget to choose yourself. And your relationship begins to feel like a burden, not because love is wrong, but because you are no longer standing on a foundation of self. When a woman remains disciplined in love, she becomes a mirror. She reflects back to the man what it looks like to remain whole. She inspires him not by force, but by example. Her life does not stop because love entered, it expands. It becomes deeper, but not diluted. Her boundaries remain intact, not to push him away, but to preserve the energy that allows her to love fully. She does not use love as an excuse to fall apart. She uses it as a reason to stay even more committed to her growth. The loss of discipline can also affect how you are perceived in the relationship. In the beginning, you may have been the woman who inspired, who carried vision, who stood with grace, but when your center begins to depend on his behavior, your energy shifts. You may become reactive, emotionally unstable, or overly available. Not because you are weak, but because you stopped nurturing the habits that once made you strong. Men sense this change. They may not always name it, but they feel it. They begin to respond to you differently. What once felt like admiration turns into assumption. What once required effort becomes expected. And over time, the value that once shined begins to fade. Not because you are any less valuable, but because you forgot how to protect it. The return to discipline is always available. It is not about punishing yourself or becoming emotionally distant. It is about coming back to what grounds you, waking up with purpose, moving your body, creating in silence, saying no when your energy says rest, speaking up when your boundary is crossed, holding space for your own emotions before asking someone else to. These small acts, repeated consistently, rebuild your internal strength. They remind you that you are not just a partner, you are a whole person with a vision, a rhythm, a responsibility to yourself. Love should never require the sacrifice of your personal structure. A relationship built on true respect will never ask you to abandon the habits that make you whole. If anything, it should protect and elevate them. The man who is right for you will not feel threatened by your discipline. He will honor it, because he knows that it is the source of your power. He will not compete with your purpose. He will support it. And if he doesn't, your discipline will give you the clarity to know that his presence is not worth the cost of your peace. The strongest women are not those who never fall in love. They are those who do so without falling apart, who can give their heart without losing their head, who can remain soft without becoming scattered. Discipline creates this balance. It allows you to love with depth, but not with desperation. It allows you to open fully, but not blindly. It allows you to connect without collapsing. When your relationship with yourself remains firm, every other relationship becomes clearer. You stop chasing love and start attracting it. You stop clinging to people and start connecting with purpose. Letting go of your discipline may feel like devotion, but real devotion never asks you to shrink. It asks you to rise. It asks you to become even more aligned, more present, more intentional, not just for the relationship, but for your own life. And when you live from that place, you no longer fear losing someone, because what you've built within yourself can never be taken away. You've learned that love at its highest level is not found in how much you can give up, but in how deeply you can remain yourself while giving your heart